I thought leaving my HOA would finally bring peace to my life, but I was wrong. Just days after I moved out, chaos erupted in the most unexpected way. It started with a quiet evening, the kind where you think nothing could possibly go wrong. Then came the knock, sharp, impatient, and full of authority. I opened the door to flashing lights, uniformed officers, and a furious HOA president standing on my lawn, screaming accusations I couldn't even understand. I had no idea that what happened next would spiral into one of the most shocking confrontations my neighborhood had ever seen. Karen, our HOA president, had always been strict, but after I officially left the association, something inside her completely snapped. That night, she stood at the end of my driveway, clutching a thick binder of HOA bylaws like it was some kind of holy scripture. Her face was red, her voice sharp, and she was shouting about community violations I didn't even know existed. According to her, by removing the HOA's property sign from my yard, a sign I legally owned, by the way, I was threatening the neighborhood's identity. It sounded ridiculous, but she was dead serious. Before I could even ask her to leave, she stormed off, phone in hand, pacing furiously as she called the cops right there in front of me. I could hear her voice echoing down the street, "Yes, officer. We have a trespasser refusing to comply with HOA regulations. Send someone immediately." My jaw dropped. Trespasser. On my own property? Minutes later, I heard the faint sound of sirens in the distance, growing louder by the second. That's when I noticed shadows moving behind curtains, neighbors peeking out, phones in hand, recording every second. Whispers spread like wildfire up and down the block, and in that moment, it felt like the entire neighborhood was holding its breath. By the time the police cars pulled up, Karen was pacing in circles, rehearsing her version of events like a stage performance. I could see two officers exchanging confused looks, clearly unsure why they were even there. What I didn't know, and what Karen definitely didn't expect, was that my son had just arrived home. And he wasn't just any son, he was a cop. Just as the officers were about to approach me, headlights swept across the street. My son's car rolled up slowly, and when he stepped out, Karen's entire expression shifted. Dressed casually but carrying himself with authority, he walked right past her shouting and straight toward the two officers. "Evening, gentlemen," he said calmly, pulling out his badge. The moment it caught the streetlight, Karen froze mid-sentence. One of the officers glanced down at the badge, then back at my son, and immediately straightened up. "Officer Daniels," one of them asked, clearly recognizing his name. My son nodded, then turned to Karen, his voice steady but firm. "Ma'am, I've reviewed the situation, and you've made a false report. You claimed there was a trespasser. But this is my father's property, he's well within his rights to be here." Karen's face went pale, but she tried to argue. "He's violating HOA regulations." "That's a crime," she screeched, waving her binder like a weapon. My son didn't even flinch. "HOA rules," he said, lowering his voice so the entire street went silent, "are not criminal law. Calling 911 under false pretenses is, however, and that's a serious offense." The officers looked at each other, and one quietly stepped forward to stand beside my son. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to calm down," he said, placing a hand near his cuffs. Karen took a step back, stammering excuses, but it was too late. My son gave a short nod, and within seconds, the officers had Karen in handcuffs, reading her rights right there on the sidewalk. The neighbors gasped. Phones were recording. And for the first time, Karen didn't have anything left to say. The entire street fell silent except for the sound of Karen's angry protests as the officers led her toward the squad car. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "This is harassment. You can't do this to me." But no one came to her defense this time. The same neighbors who once avoided crossing her were now standing outside, recording everything, whispering to one another like they were watching a live courtroom drama unfold right in front of them. I watched as Karen struggled, still clinging to her binder of HOA rules until one of the officers finally took it from her hands. My son stood beside me, arms crossed, keeping an eye on the situation. "Dad," he said quietly, "she's facing charges for filing a false police report, obstruction, and disorderly conduct. This isn't going away anytime soon." Within minutes, the flashing lights disappeared down the street, taking Karen with them. But the chaos she left behind lingered. Almost immediately, the HOA group chat exploded. Message after message flooding in from neighbors. Some were celebrating, relieved that someone had finally stood up to her bullying. Others were panicking, wondering what would happen to the HOA now that its fearless leader was in custody. By the next morning, it was all anyone in the neighborhood could talk about. Videos of Karen's arrest had already made their way to social media, gaining thousands of views overnight. The perfect community she claimed to control had suddenly become the center of online attention, and not for the reasons she wanted. But little did we know, this wasn't the end of Karen's chaos. In fact, it was only the beginning of a much bigger HOA war. I thought Karen's arrest would finally bring peace to the neighborhood, but I couldn't have been more wrong. 2 weeks later, she was out on bail, and instead of laying low, she came back with a vengeance. Late-night emails, angry letters stuffed into mailboxes, and long rants in the HOA group chat became the new normal. She claimed she was framed, accusing me and my son of abusing power, and threatening to take the HOA back by force. But here's where things took an unexpected turn. Several neighbors, tired of her bullying and reckless behavior, came together to petition for her permanent removal as HOA president. Within days, over 70% of homeowners had signed. Karen showed up at the emergency meeting furious, screaming at everyone in the room, but this time, no one backed her up. The board voted unanimously to remove her from power. You'd think that would be the end of it, except Karen had already filed a lawsuit against the HOA, claiming damages for emotional distress and defamation. That's when I realized something important. When it comes to HOA drama, there's never really an ending, just a series of escalating battles. To this day, the videos of Karen's arrest are still circulating online, and people all over the country are debating who was in the right. Was she just a power-hungry HOA president, or did she truly believe she was defending the community? One thing's for sure, living under an HOA can turn ordinary neighbors into bitter enemies faster than you'd think. And if you've ever faced an HOA nightmare of your own, I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below, hit that subscribe button, and stay tuned, because I've got even crazier HOA cases coming your way. When the investigator showed up at the HOA office with a federal warning notice, panic spread through the board like wildfire. Suddenly, the same people who had mocked me, threatened me, and harassed me for weeks were scrambling to cover their tracks. Greg tried to spin the story, claiming the driver had lost control of the vehicle, but my camera footage told the truth. A week later, I received an official letter from the HOA. All violation notices against me had been rescinded. My mailbox was declared fully compliant, and they deeply regretted any misunderstanding. In other words, they surrendered. But that wasn't the end. Word of the incident spread across the neighborhood, and residents started demanding a vote to remove Greg and several board members for abuse of power. Within a month, the vote passed. Greg was out. The HOA cops were replaced. And the new board issued an apology letter to every homeowner in the community, promising transparency and fairness moving forward. As for my mailbox, it still stands to this day, untouched, flawless, and stronger than ever. People still walk by, stop, and laugh when they see it, knowing the story behind it. That steel-reinforced monument has become a symbol of standing up to bullies, even when they're hiding behind HOA titles and fancy rules. If there's one thing I learned from all this, it's simple: sometimes the best revenge is letting people destroy themselves. All I had to do was stay smart, stay patient, and let their arrogance do the work. And if you've ever faced your own HOA nightmare, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stick around, because trust me, we've got plenty more shocking HOA case files coming your way.